are in listen-only mode.
Hi, and welcome everyone to this TU-Automotive webinar covering autonomous testing in Europe. My name is Emily Leblanc. I will be hosting today's webinar. Autonomous vehicle development is advancing rapidly, with testing now happening on public streets as well as test beds. We'd like to bring you an up-to-date on the latest developments on both the policy and the technology sides. I would like to introduce and thank our expert presenters today. Florine van de Wind, Cluster Manager Smart Mobility for the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment for the Netherlands. Ewan Perry, Head of Insurance for TRL. Harry Santamala, CEO Sensible 4 and former Project Director Smarter Mobility at Helsinki Metropolia University of Applied Sciences. Today's webinar will be interactive, so after we have heard from our speakers, they will be answering audience questions. So please send those in through the session. Just to let you know, we will also be sending around the recording of today's webinar to all those who have registered, so you can expect to receive it early next week. You've heard enough from me. I would like to hand over to our first presenter, Florine, Cluster Manager Smart Mobility for the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment of the Netherlands. We'll pass it on to her.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Good morning to you all. Well, due to security reasons, my government does not allow me to log into the webinar today, so I'm a bit handicapped today, and I warn you that you maybe hear the next slide, please, a bit quite often. So if my story will not be parallel with the slides anymore, then Emily will help us fix that. And it did also make me wonder, will in the future it be possible that my government does not allow me to use certain cars for security reasons to drive in? What I will do today is take you a bit through the policy process in the Netherlands and also why we think testing with connected and automated driving is so important. Next slide, please. Because in the world of today, we see that due to all kinds of developments, we have far more traffic than we did a decennia ago. We have issues and big challenges in climate change, security, and urbanization. And therefore, we as a ministry think that, well, infrastructure alone as a solution to all those challenges is not enough anymore. So that is why we think it's quite important to also look into all innovative solutions, and especially connected and automated driving has had our intention. We have dedicated much time to connected and automated driving in the last years. So first of all, next slide please. We believe that connected and automated driving can reduce traffic jams and road accidents and help us to reduce emissions, especially when those vehicles are not only automated, but also are able to communicate with each other and with the infrastructure. And secondly, we believe, next slide please, that automation, data and connectivity can also help us to improve efficiencies in the cities. We all want more attractive and livable cities, and more infrastructure and more vehicles in the cities will not help us with that. But if we would share more our mobility, which will be maybe more easy when it comes to self-driving vehicles or self-driving pods, we could organize our mobility in cities far more flexible. And to be honest, I think that everybody would like to have more green in the cities, more parks than parkings. So another thing that we think about is social inclusion. Next slide, please. In the Netherlands, there are many elderly people. They will increase with 60% in 30 years' times, and it is very important for this group to stay mobile. And also we have a lot of handicapped people for which mobility is organized separately, and that costs well, hundreds of millions a year. And maybe with self-driving vehicles, shared mobility of pods, it can help us to to organize that in a more flexible sense. So one of the examples is that we have a handicap center in the city of Amsterdam, for which we were seeing if it is possible to test if they could use a self-driving pod to drive from their home, in which they live in together, to their daily care center. So every day now the bus is coming there, they have to get in as fast as possible, although they may be not ready for that. And a self-driving vehicle that would, well, continuously drive between the home and the daily care center could really help improve not only mobility but also the care for those people. So we are looking into this case with self-driving pod manufacturers to see if we can test this really out in practice. And as I continue my story, you will maybe notice that we really try to make connection with the society in testing and not only see it from a technological point of view. And the last one, next slide please, is that we also see that we have some challenges for maintaining our infrastructure. The infrastructure of our roads, but also for public transport will cost a lot, and we will have to see what the impact of all those new vehicles will be on this infrastructure. And we also believe that especially when connected and automated driving in the future will be combined with more sharing of mobility, that it could really help us to come to a more efficient ways of organizing public transport and maybe make it a bit more efficiently with regard to financing that as well. So that is why we have big ambitions with regard to connected and automated driving. On the next slide you will see my minister, but also our King of the Netherlands. They are both quite interested in these developments and have done a lot the last years to promote these developments within the Netherlands and to see if we can help from governmental side to reduce the barriers that are here for testing. So on the next slide you see one of those barriers, the legislative challenges. Every driver shall at all times be able to control his vehicle or guide his animals. So this is really a sentence that I copy-paste from a treaty, the Vienna Treaty and the Geneva Treaty, that will give direction to all legislation with regard to traffic safety and traffic within Europe, but also abroad. So this is one of the things that we have to deal with and that we have to change. Well, most of the time changing such a treaty will take a lot of time. So what we have come up with is to see if we can maybe handle it in such a way that we will be more flexible in the future to respond on innovative solutions. So we have not changed, we as the Netherlands are not in favor to amend these treaties, international treaties, but come to a joint interpretation. This proposal was discussed also in Geneva, and I'm proud and happy to say that member states agreed. So now we are working together with many member states to see if we can interpret, give a bit of guidance to this document, which as a result make level 4 and 5 systems possible on the public roads and also the testing of those systems, because we really believe in a in an approach of learning by doing, and in that sense testing is quite important. So in the Netherlands, next slide, you can test in real life traffic. We have changed legislation already a few years ago, and on the next slide we also have a new legislation in order that makes it possible to even test without a vehicle, without a driver in the vehicle. So I think that could be quite interesting to some pod manufacturers or other manufacturers in the future. And then in the process of changing our own legislation, we saw that many European member states and also in the United States are quite busy facilitating these developments, only we all did it alone. So in the UK there was new legislation, in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in Germany. And that is why we decided, also our minister, next slide please, to organize a ministerial roundtable when we were President of the European Union, in which we declared, have the Declaration of Amsterdam signed, and that is a declaration for the cooperation in the field of connected and automated driving. It contains an agenda European-wide that handles all the issues that will be needed from a governmental side and the industry side to work together and see how what we need to change in legislation, but also in investments in infrastructure, for example, digital infrastructure, or agreements on how data will be used in the future and how it can be used in a secure manner. So this is the agenda that we now work out in a high-level meeting on connected and automated driving. That's an informal group of ministers and also director generals of all member states of the European Union. Also the European Commission is involved, DG Move, but also from the parts of DG Grow, Competitiveness, and DG Telecom for the telecom sector. They're all involved in discussing this agenda and follow the actions on this agenda. So what we did at that time is also, next slide please, let all European ministers experience automated driving through the city of Amsterdam. It was on the real streets, not on a test area. They drove through the city center in highly automated vehicles, some research vehicles, some vehicles that were just in the showroom. All manufacturers, which we were really grateful for, helped us out in letting the ministers experience this. And I think this was quite important to show them that its development is right on their doorstep and it is not something of the far future. As the European Truck Platooning Challenge, in which all the manufacturers from Europe came from their home country and drove in a platoon to the port of Rotterdam. And that showed us also in practice what is needed. For example, in many member states, the distance that is allowed between trucks differs. So in one country it is 50 meters, in the other country it's 2 seconds. In the Netherlands it's called a safe distance. So if we want to enable cross-border transportation in the future with all these new innovative vehicles, we need to change this and harmonize this in such a way that it can be efficiently. On the next slide you see how we want to continue with truck platooning in real life cases. So we have now organized the logistics sector and discussed with them what could the value of truck platooning be for your logistic cooperation. And therefore we defined some corridors in which they said, okay, it could be really interesting to start truck platooning on those corridors first. So that is something that we are working out now with the logistics sectors, and which also are in conversation with many truck OEMs. So on the next slide we see that we have also been testing with self-driving pods in rural areas. And as you see, this pod is driving on the bicycle lane. We have lots of them in the Netherlands. And testing is also has to do about learning. So what we have learned here is that you see the woman cycle behind the vehicle. These vehicles drive on a really slow speed. So we have like 20-25 kilometers an hour. So sometimes the cyclist wanted to, well, drive across the self-driving vehicle, and that was not possible. So there were some things in, okay, how will the interaction be in the future between vehicles and cyclists and pedestrians, but also with cars? And that is something that we pay a lot of attention to when we have tests in the Netherlands. So next slide, you see the future bus of Mercedes. We were quite proud that Daimler chose the Netherlands to introduce their automated bus concept. Every year they introduce a new automated concept. So first it was the automated truck, Then it was the automated F015. It was a quite futuristic personal vehicle. And this was a bus that drove from Schiphol Airport to Haarlem. It's a city near Schiphol, on a bus track, interacting with other traffic, and it was interacting also with the traffic lights. So this bus would already let the traffic lights know that it was coming, and then the traffic lights will easily give time to green or give a green light for this bus. So on my final slide, I want to show you something about our newest ambitions. We call it the Dutch tulip, because we saw that in testing in the Netherlands, and I think we see it across Europe, that there is a lot of testing going on, but it is not all quite focused or dense on certain corridors or use cases. So what we would like to do is that we have chosen a use case or a corridor from the Port of Rotterdam that will go through the Netherlands towards Antwerp and also the German Ruhr area. So what we would like to do is test highly dense truck platooning there, and also connected and automated driving in the higher levels, level 3 and 4, autopilot on the highway, so that we can also really have learning experience for the transition that we need in traffic management, in the transition that we need maybe in investments in our infrastructure, digital infrastructure. So this is something that we will discuss the coming days during the next high-level meeting in the IAA in Frankfurt. Maybe some of you will be in Frankfurt the coming days as well. This is where Germany will organize the next high-level meeting with ministers, European commissioners, and industry. So Dr. Zetsche, the CEO of the board of the ASEA, will be there, for example, to discuss how we can make the next step in testing in the Netherlands, but also in Europe as a whole. So this was a bit of the overview that I would like to give to you. Well, maybe later there's time for questions. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Florin. We've had some questions coming in, but please keep sending them. We'll submit them at the end of all the presentations to the audience, to the panelists if we have time. Now I will pass over to our next presenter, which is Ewan Perry, Head of Insurance for TRL. There we go.
I was talking there with my
I was going to say, I think you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. And just to introduce myself again, I'm Ewan Perry. I'm from Transport Research Laboratory in the UK. And I want to talk to you about an initiative that we're taking forward here in London. And it's actually part of a wider strategy that the UK government is launching around establishing a connected set of autonomous vehicle test beds, which will be both on-road and off-road, in order to provide a sequence of testing capabilities here in the UK that allow us to bring new technologies onto the road, testing both the technologies themselves in terms of connected and automated technologies, but also then testing the mobility solutions that these technologies offer. So just to look at the progress in the UK over the last couple of years, TRL's actually led on one of the very first projects in the UK, a project called Gateway, which I'll show you some images of in a second. And Gateway was the gate part is representing the Greenwich Automated Test Environment, where we've undertaken public trials demonstrating use cases for autonomy, and really importantly taking the technology and putting it into the hands of real users who are able to give us feedback about the experience of using these types of automated systems, which gives us insight into the future applications, and that we see as a critical element of how automated transport evolves, in that it really does need to be introduced in a way that is addressing real needs. And we heard Florian talk about things like access to mobility, which again we see is really a really important element of the kinds of service that initial and early stage automated transport systems can provide. The UK government's also taken leadership in the development of the Code of Practice here in the UK for driverless vehicles, which has allowed us to undertake on-road vehicle trials since 2015. It's been reviewing regulations and supporting industry through connected and autonomous vehicle funding rounds through UK Innovate UK funding. And that's resulted in quite a number of really exciting projects being undertaken here in the UK, and I'll talk you through a couple of the ones that TRL are involved with. And then more recently, Highways England are now launching their own platooning work in the UK, and TRL is going to be taking forward that work over the next year or two, and I'm sure that will build very well upon the excellent work that's been done by the Dutch already. And then finally, the round this year has been focusing on the development of connected and autonomous vehicle testing facilities, and that is something which TRL are leading on in the development of an automated vehicle test bed in London, and I'll talk to you about that as well. So just a little bit of background about TRL and some of the projects that we're involved with. The Gateway project I mentioned was set up in 2014. And that has come through to deliver on-road trials or trials which have been undertaken in public spaces, should I say, rather than in road environments, but environments in which pedestrians and cyclists are operating. And this has provided us with the challenge of actually deploying these technologies in the real world, complying with all necessary regulations, overcoming legal barriers, and working with stakeholders and consumers to really understand the acceptance of these types of systems and how we actually go about implementing them in a safe way in an urban environment. And there's huge challenges, as you might imagine, with all of those questions. Also addressing areas such as the verification and validation of automated driving systems, which is going to be a huge challenge not only to the technology developers themselves, but obviously the regulators that are responsible for identifying the levels of performance that vehicles on our roads need to meet. We've been working with, in a project led by Bosch and Jaguar Land Rover, on a program called Move UK, which is really trying to accelerate that process of gathering real-world data to accelerate the process of automated system verification and validation. Other projects we've been looking at are projects such as Atlas, which is one in which we're using the sensor data acquired by a vehicle operating, automated vehicle operating in the real world, to feed that data back into a smart city network, essentially operating as an environmental sensing platform to inform the smart city of issues that it may wish to address from a city operational point of view. That might be air quality, it might be road maintenance, or safety issues occurring on the road. And then in addition to those projects, we're looking at business models for automated vehicle deployment and mobility service through Merge Greenwich, and future level 4 deployments of level 4 automated vehicle technologies through projects Driven and Streetwise, and here working with 5AI, it's an exciting startup automated driving control company here in the UK, and Oxbotica, another slightly more established automated control system for automated driving here in the UK, who's already been undertaking trials on the UK's roads. And so here's some images of the work we've been doing with the Gateway trials. We've taken the pod from the Heathrow Terminal 5 automated system, which is operating in a very constrained environment, in a guideway environment, and given that vehicle additional sensing capability to operate in the real world environment controlled by an automated control system. And that's been providing passenger services, and the users have been exposed to experiencing a ride along the Thames riverbank in an area which is open to pedestrians and cyclists. And that's allowed us to generate a huge amount of feedback and insight into the attitude of real users to this kind of technology. And on the bottom two images there, you can see the vehicle that was put together by Oxbotica for trialling the delivery, last mile delivery of groceries within an area of London. And that trial was set up to really look at, again, the user response to being able to receive groceries that were delivered to them through an automated delivery system. And these projects have really given us insight into the challenges of deploying these kinds of technologies into the real world, the stakeholder engagement, the protocol development that we need to go through, and crucially the risk assessment, risk mitigation from an environmental sense to vehicle, human and operational standpoints. The safety case that underlies these tests and experiments are absolutely crucial. We can't afford to implement things in the real world that put users or operators at risk, and that's been a fundamental part of the work that TRL have been undertaking in relation to these demonstrations. And that work will go on with our creation of the testbed in London. That testbed will be underpinned by this kind of risk assessment, risk mitigation, safety case and safe operating protocols that we've established through our work to date. And we've also been looking, obviously, the behaviour not only of the vehicle systems and the supervisors of those vehicle systems, but also the users, the public who will have access to integrating or interacting with automated systems, plus the pedestrians, cyclists and other road users that are operating around them. And that insight, again, is crucial to help building and developing our understanding of the risk assessment, mitigation, safety case and deployment issues in the real world. And all of these capabilities are building towards being able to test systems in more detail, understand the performance of automated driving systems in the real world, and help us to evaluate and ultimately validate potentially the behaviour and performance of systems in the real world conditions, which is a huge challenge in terms of how automated driving systems evolve through the next few years. And onboard data is a critical part of that. We need to be able to record the events that occur that are of interest. These are events where something may be happening that is of specific interest to the development of the control system, or an event that represents a safety issue, and also to provide systems monitoring. So how do we implement systems which constantly monitor the performance of the onboard system, so that we can be assured that the system is operating in peak condition at all times. So London provides an excellent backdrop to undertake this kind of work. It's a very complex environment by its nature, and we believe that the challenge of operating in a city environment such as London is one that, if we're able to address that challenge sufficiently, then the automated systems that are proven in that type of environment really do have a very wide application to many different types of road environment, that both within the city and outside of the city. There are also many other advantages to operating in London, such as a very advanced transport network and the role of Transport for London in pushing innovation in the transit sector, together with the finance and access to innovation within London as well. So our work in the Living Lab is including cybersecurity, supporting innovation, being technology agnostic is really important, that we don't find that as we start to support innovation in this area that we bake in certain types of technologies that limit further innovation at some point in the future. And that's, we see, as really crucial to supporting SMEs in the development of this new area, particularly in the mobility space, where small medium enterprises are really very well placed to implement some very innovative solutions. And I think we've seen that in the US and some quite considerable valuations of businesses coming from implementing new and connected mobility solutions. Of course, these types of environments by their nature need to be open and collaborative, and as I've said earlier, set a very clear focus on safety and standards development. So this is the area in London in which we're focusing our activities. So at the top of the picture there we have Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in Stratford, which is the home of the London Olympics, and provides a really open parkland environment with relatively low traffic, which provides a really good entry-level environment into a sort of real-world, relatively clean, clear, and a new infrastructure environment for initial on-road vehicle testing. And on the southern side of the river there is the Borough of Greenwich, which has been a partner and a really leading partner amongst the boroughs in London in the field of automated vehicles, and they're partnered with us on a number of projects. And you can see there are a number of zones that we've identified as being areas of specific interest. So the area of Greenwich has quite a wide range of areas, from sort of focusing on tourism and entertainment in Zone 1, where we've been trialling our shuttles to date, to quite dated and car-centric residential areas in Area 2, where the Thamesmead development has a very high reliance on car ownership and relatively low access to public transport. In these areas, we need to identify what the solutions are that are going to disconnect residents from their need for a car. And only by doing that in these kinds of areas can we really look to address the kinds of congestion challenges and the air quality challenges that London faces. In Area 4, in Area 3, this is the more historic, older area of Greenwich, which is a complex road system and really offers a very difficult and sort of probably uniquely European characteristic road environment, which is highly congested, huge numbers of cyclists, pedestrians, forming a really complex environment for an automated vehicle to be able to navigate. And then our fourth area is focused around commuter corridors, very high volume corridor environments in which, again, improving the efficiency of vehicle flows through those areas is an extremely desirable outcome from automated vehicle testing. So we're looking to work with the OEMs, automotive supply chain, technology companies, the transport providers and authorities themselves, and TfL in London are a partner in the work that we're doing. City designers and planners who are looking to the opportunities that changes in the way that our transport systems may operate through the development of automated vehicles and the opportunities that might occur through that. The academia, really strong academic organisations in London, and then the finance, insurance and really innovative environment that we have here in London. And this is then to provide these customer groups with capabilities around, firstly, vehicle validation. This is a really strong area of capability here in the UK, and a really crucial capability that is needed in a real-world test bed. The validation, the verification of vehicle systems in real environments, real-world environments, is a key part of the validation process as we see it, particularly with regard to looping back to the virtual validation that we really see as underpinning a lot of the validation work that will be needing to be undertaken with connected autonomous vehicles. But also the systems that are developed and any vehicle mobility system that is deployed will then need to be verified and validated essentially through customer interaction. And again, only by deploying in the real world, only by establishing the ways for customers to interact with these types of new mobility systems can the customer verification angle really be achieved. And then we're building on the expertise that we already have in terms of deploying the trials that we've talked about already, providing access to a whole range of different technologies, from scheduling capabilities to live data streams, which really allow innovators to optimize their technologies, and providing things like access to emulated ticketing systems such as the London Oyster card system. We're supporting that with very capable data services and communications, and that will be underpinned in the wider organization through development of standards, and then providing really London as a high-profile location to demonstrate and trial vehicles really puts these developments on a global stage. The types of facilities, as you would expect really in this kind of environment, are focusing on the data communications, the mobile communications as well, and then providing the roadside communications as well, particularly around ITS 5G, vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication. The area of Greenwich in the next few years will become the first testbed for 5G mobile in the UK as well, so we'll be testing multiple different types of communication layers, in addition to supporting things like CCTV, ground truth data, trialing things like LiDAR detection, and also looking at things like pop-up infrastructure, which can be located at any location within London in order to investigate the behaviours of different types of vehicles or control systems in different types of locations. So a range of different types of facilities there. I want to continue to go through, so we're staying on time on this presentation. Let me go to the next one, and part of the vision here is to ensure that we're building on the work that we have undertaken with Gateway, and deploying more realistic and usable mobility services, which actually integrate with and complement existing transport capabilities in London. And one of the absolute underlying principles again here is to ensure that the work we're doing doesn't actually harm any of the existing transport infrastructure. So this is about creating complementary solutions which enhance the existing solutions and which improve the overall range of transport options available to users. We're working with a team of both industry, private sector partners, public sector partners on this as well. So you see some of those organisations listed there, and we've got engagement from a very wide range of industry who've committed to work with us in terms of developing the Living Lab concept and starting to undertake testing and development in that area. And we're really keen to ensure that worldwide we're engaging with that. So please use my contact details here, get in touch, talk to us about how we can work with you in developing and testing your automated vehicles here in London. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ewan. Without further ado, we'll pass on to our last presenter, which is Harry Santamala, CEO of Sensible 4.
Hi to all. I'm going to briefly speak about sort of my own first-hand experiments in testing out autonomous or automated vehicles in open traffic. So I actually have currently 2 positions, and we are today going to focus more on social project where we tested the easy mile automated buses in a mixed traffic conditions. So the angle of my speech will be coming from sort of bus operator or from the viewpoint of the city more than which would be the other angle is the picture on the right, which is our own technology platform, which we are also testing in open road conditions. So what's happening in Finland, because our law was written in the 70s in a way that the government forgot to mention that we need to have a steering wheel. or that we need to have a driver inside the vehicle. The government ruled a few years ago that we can do automated or test autonomous vehicles in real traffic without having a physical driver inside the vehicle, but we still need to have the human who can take control if needed. So then it's a technical question, how can you actually do that? And because of this and because of the challenge of our sometimes harsh conditions, the government started a sort of Arctic automation initiative. We have in Lapland we have a 10 kilometers of highway which has been very well fitted with sensors and telemetry, and you can get 3D maps and accurate GPS positioning there, which is dedicated for testing for non-urban automation in winter conditions. But besides that, we are working in the sort of urban conditions with mixed traffic to be able to sort of open the market for the idea of automation in public transportation, get people to understand what people expect from the automation, identify the main barriers which we should together or by the technology provider overcome to go towards commercial operation, and this is all about the bus projects you can see in this picture. So what we did last year in Sohio project, we rented 2 Easymail buses, took them to Finland, and we put them to 3 pilots in 3 cities: Helsinki, Espoo, which is close to Helsinki, and Tampere, which is 200 kilometers away. And all of them were in open road mixed traffic conditions. And the idea was to really identify the main issues which we should overcome and get companies working in sort of automation or intelligent transport systems or even ICT, get them involved in trying to overcome and solve these problems by technical or more service needs. So what we did, we had 3 routes. On the left, top left corner, you can see the Helsinki route. It's a bit small image, but we had only 2 bus stops. This was in the middle of summer, so clear conditions. But in this route, which is looking very simple, we actually had a mix of varying traffic. We had everything from pedestrians, bicycles, personal vehicles, buses, trucks, and even tourist buses, which are vehicle class of their own because of the bad behavior of the drivers. Then we went to Espoo, picture on the top right, and that's a university campus area where we have a lot of scattered buildings and tech companies and sort of research area, but the main problem is that the area diameter is around 1 mile, and it's full of small roads where no conventional means of transportation can really operate in, and here we were mixing with the traffic, but we were more focusing on offering any people who wanted to try or use the service free drive and to really get their feedback on the feasibility of such operation. Tampere on the bottom center was similar, but the weather changed into more winter conditions, which were also the limiting factor of the operation. And to understand how we need to deal with autonomous vehicles or automated buses at the moment, we need to, in the city infrastructure, we need to take into account that the autonomous vehicle, although we are mimicking traditional vehicles, they do not work in the same way or in all conditions or behave in the same way as humans would do. And it's always a question that you need to understand and control your, besides the technology in the vehicle, you need to be able to understand the environment where you take the vehicle to. And in the picture you can see the traffic arrangements. We were basically giving the buses priority over in the crossings over other vehicles. And in short pilots, this can create a bit of a risk because of the when you change the traffic rules, it takes time before people can adjust to the new set of rules. Just quickly, here's same in ESPO. All those arrows and numbers are presenting some changes in the traffic rules to guarantee that the operation will be safe at all times. Some issues which you may face if you do something similar are shown here. The first one on the left is people overtake the automated traffic, and that's fine if you do it safely. But what may happen is that when you overtake the autonomous bus or some autonomous vessel, you cut in back to your lane too close to the vehicle, and then it may think that there's some obstacle in front of you, make emergency stop, which then by itself is safe, but maybe somebody is behind you and will cause something to occur. The picture in the middle represents a problem we face, that the people, as it is in our nature not to follow traffic rules fully, and especially we had a lot of issues with the no stopping rule. Cars were parked in the middle of the road where the vehicle should have been driving, and which was a difficult thing to handle because overtaking from the opposite lane is a safety concern. And the last one on the right, people may not respect traffic signs, even if you put a big red stop sign there, they may still not follow the traffic rules. So you need to think how you can guarantee the safety from the automation side, even when the people make mistakes. Because if something happens, and even if the automated vehicle is not directly reason for the accident, this may have a very bad media as a result, which may make your life more difficult. We learned that the illegal parking, besides the environmental issues, which are mostly issues when you have a heavy rain or heavy snow or something which blocks your sense of vision. Besides that, the biggest cause for stopping the service was really illegal parking. And I think that's something that we need to make sure that the people in the area are aware of how the autonomous vehicle functions. So maybe then they, at least part of them, will respect it more. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Harry. We've had a few questions coming in. We don't have tons of time, so I'll try to merge a few questions into one. We'll see how that goes. But basically, there's a few questions coming in around kind of the EU as a whole. Is there a plan for, right now there's kind of a lot of country things happening. Is there a plan for kind of EU-wide testing and EU-wide legislation? So maybe if I give you all maybe a minute to answer that, what do you think? So maybe if we start with Florian.
Well, I think it is there, and it is being discussed in the following days actually by plenty of ministers, European commissioners and industry to really give it a push. And the subjects that will be on the agenda for the coming days are especially dedicated to infrastructure, to cross-border testing, and how we can come up with a better plan, data, the exchange of data coming from vehicles, and ethical issues. So cross-border testing, there will be a dedicated task force, public, private, and the European Commission. And I think that, well, the high-level meeting that will be organized by Germany will dedicate quite some time to the questions that you just mentioned.
Perfect. Ewan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I think I'd say what is needed across Europe is we're always going to have a very high degree of commonality around the test work and the need for common standards, and that will of course be implemented by the European Commission in terms of regulation. What underpins the development of that regulation is the development of evidence around the performance and the operation of these technologies in the real world. And I think multiple different environments across Europe will ensure that that evidence is developed from a regulatory point of view. So I do see that then across, but also I think that it's really important that the various testing areas that develop within Europe are talking to each other and sharing experience and sharing understanding of the most effective ways to test, develop, deploy these technologies, so we really do get a common understanding of the impacts that they'll potentially deliver on a whole range of different types of environments, from cities through to highways through to more rural environments.
Perfect. And
I
final
will
word
add
for Harry.
on top of these points. Yes, on top of these points, coming from a startup company who is developing and testing our own system in order to make a product out of that, which will be sold around Europe. This is a really big concern for us because we are working very closely with the Finnish government to make sure that whatever we do is in alignment with the Finnish law and with how they see that the EU level will go. But that is a really big concern to make sure that the different trials and pilots and test areas, they really do communicate with each other and with the local governments, and then to make sure that everybody is aligned towards the same direction, and what work we do now can then be utilized in a real products around Europe.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think I'll let everyone go. It's time to wrap things up. I would like to thank all of our speakers for giving their time today and helping to share their insight with everyone that has tuned in. Many of the questions that we have addressed today and the ones that we didn't manage to get to, along with other topics, will be explored further at the TU-Automotive Europe Conference and Exhibition on November 6th and 7th in Munich. You can find the email address on the screen right now at the bottom left if you want more information. For now, on behalf of TU-Automotive, thank you ever so much to our speakers, Florian, Ewan, and Harry, and thank you all very much for listening. You will receive an email with the recording of this session in the next few days, so keep an eye out. So have a good day, everyone.